Well, hello, everybody, and happy Monday. Welcome to CHLY 101.7 FM. I'm Kathy Holmes. I am absolutely delighted to be with you today. Thanks so much for tuning in to Act 3. On today's program, we're going to talk to Vicky Trill, who has had her own experience with endometriosis and infertility. We're going to figure out what all that looks like in her world, and hopefully it'll inspire you to ask questions in your world as well. So without further ado, Vicky Trill, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Kathy.
I am so glad that you're here. And I know that this is, at Christmas time especially, there are a lot of people that, that remember what it's like to be a child themselves and they want that for their lives, right? But there's a lot of women out there that unfortunately have much more difficulty when it comes to having children. I wonder if you could share a little bit about, your experience with that. And let's, I don't again want to be super voyeuristic, but I think that our listeners are really interested to know, what does it look like
Mhm.
for you?
Yeah. So, I always had the dream of before I was 30, I would have four children. People ask you just before you're graduating from high school, what are you going to do? And what do people say, oh, I'm going to go to university and do this. I'm going to do that. And secretly, I just wanted to be a mom. That was my goal, is to find the right person, get married, have four kids, grow up with them. And honestly, there was no plan B.
Yeah.
And um, I did find the right person, and we got married, and I was right on track with my original plan. And then I just wasn't getting pregnant, and I just wasn't getting pregnant. And um, this was not at all part of my plan. And so now what? Now what do we do? And you're young, so you think, well, time is on our side. And so, but then into my 30s, still, my plan A wasn't panning out as I had thought. We looked into some IVF to try to investigate to find out what was going on. IVF was suggested, but at that time, that's when I found out that I actually had a disease, which is quite common. I'd never heard of it before, though, called endometriosis, which also explained my many years of very painful periods, um, and was also probably, and they still say probably, the explanation for the infertility. So they did say, well, there's a little bit of percentage of chance. I think it was less than 15%, maybe more like 12% chance that you would conceive if you try IVF, in vitro fertilization. And by the way, it's over $20,000 per
I
try.
was going
And
to say, I think it's very expensive to have it. At least
yes,
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And of course, then we didn't live anywhere near a fertility doctor. So that was a 4 hour drive, 4 to 5 hours one way, just to be able to access those treatments. And so we decided at that time, you know what, we're during our 30s, we have time, we still have time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that process continued. And throughout that time, that 15 years is what we ended up struggling through infertility. There's as you all know, the monthly cycle. And um, it's that constant roller coaster of hope, 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 and then disappointment and despair, and sometimes depression. And then again, hope, 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 disappointment. And every time you get your period, that's when you come back down the roller coaster. Just so disappointing that it didn't turn out again and again and again. I had a number of surgeries in there to deal with the endometriosis that was in there. And they at one point told me I had a less than 1% chance of ever conceiving. Um,
Wow.
and that just that word, less than 1%.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know why they didn't just say zero, because it, really was kind of zero, but less than 1%. I guess that just still gives you hope. And so
It
we kept
does.
riding the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for our listeners who might not understand endometriosis, and again, that's one of the reasons potentially as to the infertility, but I've heard from a lot of people that have shared their experiences with infertility that endometriosis is often the cause. But a lot of people don't really know what it is. Would you mind sharing what exactly is endometriosis?
hmm Well, I should have brushed up on all my definitions, but
No worries.
so every month, as part of the natural process of
Yeah.
women in menstruation, endometrial tissue comes along inside of the uterus, which is just part of what normally happens. And when there's no pregnancy, of course, that's when we get our period, and the endometrial tissue goes as well. With endometriosis, that tissue, for some reason, or that, if that's what we call it, you'll have to Google it if you want to
Yeah,
get the
for sure.
proper explanation.
The baby
It
bed,
attaches,
either way. Yep.
yeah. So the endometrial portion, it attaches itself to other parts of your body. So,
Right.
and there's different kinds. What they told me, I had all three. Lucky me. Um,
Oh
so that
my.
endometrial tissue, when it goes into different areas, such as the bowel or um,
Mhm.
the bladder, for instance, it can do something. So it causes lesions. So as it attaches at the part of the cycle, when it pulls off, it causes scar tissue or lesion.
Mhm.
It can also, as it attaches, uh, fusing together other organs, as ended up being in my case, which I haven't finished the end of my story, but I can tell you what that crazy endometriosis did.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Multiple things can be fused together. So you end up with lesions and fusions, and then you can also have cysts that occur as well. I had those on my ovary. So number of laparoscopies to address these things. They would take away the some whatever they could for lesions. But of course, every time you go in there with a laparoscope, it also causes more scarring as well. So there's kind of a fine line of how often should you have the surgery, and what all. But of course, every time after the surgery, they'd say, well, now is the chance to try to get pregnant. Well, I mean, we've been trying to get pregnant for 15 years and nothing had helped, as well as multiple surgeries. But we continue to try, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can only imagine the heartbreak that you must have gone through as, everybody has an opinion. Everybody, they're like, come on now, you should be able to.
Mhm.
What was some of the feedback from the people that are in your life that, maybe didn't necessarily help with the situation?
Yeah, yeah. I there's kind of three. I kind of put them into three categories, and but first, let me say, I mean, my family was so supportive. My mom just was always there to support me in whatever way, and they actually say that couples who go through infertility, it increases their chances of divorce by double. And
Yes. Yes.
throughout this time, really, our relationship remains strong, and I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, three groups of people. I found that after you've been trying for a little while, people start to think, well, why haven't had any kids yet? They've been married for quite some time now, and so people start to think about that, and then they think, oh, then they start to feel bad. So they pity you, or they feel bad about all of that, but they're not really sure how to respond. So they try to protect you in a way that yeah, so that they don't cause more pain. So they wouldn't invite you to a baby party of some sort or something like that.
Yeah.
They might not talk about their new pregnancy, or they might not. So but it's very obvious, especially when you walk into the room, everyone's having a hearty conversation, and suddenly it gets quiet or it changes. So there's kind of that one group that tries to protect you, um, and then another group of people who want to help. So they kind of know that something's going on, um, and so they give advice. They think that, well, if we want to help. And honestly, Kathy, I got so many very interesting pieces of advice, and I think people were well-meaning,
Of course.
but quite surprising. I mean, and everything from, well, did you know I got pregnant right after I drove my car into a telephone pole, and that's what did it for me. And another time
Oh
was,
dear.
I watched some dogs doing it outside, and they were stuck together for a long time. So that's what we did, and that's what worked for me.
Oh wow. Oh
So,
wow. So the
and then of course
perpetuation
there's
of,
the regular one, just relax. You're just too stressed every
yeah.
time. that you're trying, every time you're having sex, I guess you're too stressed. And so that was a common one. Another common one is, when you stop wanting kids so much, that's when you'll get them.
Yeah.
And, although I love to be gracious and I want to be gracious of all that, most people I think are honestly just trying to help. But those comments are not helpful at all. If you just take it a
No.
half a step further to think about, what is it implying if you say, well, just relax or just stop wanting something, it brings it back to it's my fault or something I'm doing
Exactly.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes
Um,
the game as
mhm,
opposed to,
and
being
I'm already
supportive.
doing that
Of course you are.
to
Of
myself.
course. Sure.
And then I would say the third group of people are just oblivious to it all, and they just don't know. But there was one person, that meant so much to me throughout that time. I don't know how many years into the infertility we were, but it was obvious that we were struggling and that this was something that was just a heartache for us. And she came up to me one day and said, "I can see that you're struggling, and I don't really know anything about infertility or what you're going through, and I don't know what to say. I'm not sure what to do. Would you just tell me how you would like me to respond?" And actually, I didn't have an answer for her, but I have to say that question meant so much to me. And it just was the perfect thing to say, just to say, I don't know what to say. I'm not sure what to do, but I want to let you know that I love you. I see you struggling, and I'm here, whatever way you want me to support you. Um, oh, that just really touched my heart and meant so much to me.
And it's such sage advice because at the end of the day, we want to be supportive to our friends that are in need, regardless of the situation, whether it is an illness or a transition in work or life experiences or family dynamics or whatever it is. It's like, what does support look like to you? And then let me hold that space for you. And
Hmm.
and so your friend's sage advice is not
Hmm.
only beautiful, but remarkably, it's poignant for almost every situation.
Hmm.
So, so as you were going through this in that 15-year period, I can only imagine the insecurity and frustration and just the whole, why isn't this happening kind of thing. Obviously, I've had not had the experience with that, so I can't speak to that in that way. But I would imagine that there were a lot of things going through your mind. And I'm wondering if you could share, like, what are some of those things that you would tell yourself as you were going through the experience?
Hmm. Well, so much negative self-talk. I don't know if uh, us as women, we're often the queens of it, and we need to work on
Yeah,
that for sure. Um, Things that just really aren't true, voices that come in that's
yeah.
true.
Stories we tell
Uh,
ourselves. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's right. I'd hear thoughts that would say, well, the reason why you don't get pregnant is because you just be a bad mother. Um,
oh my
yeah.
God. And I can't even imagine that for you, Vicky. You're the most warm and beautiful and lovely soul. I just, the concept of you saying that to yourself is heartbreaking.
I think that we always look for reasons why.
Yeah,
Why does this happen? And I think we do that with so many things, right? And this is just one of those things. And this is infertility is a constant grief. It was a death of a dream, a death of what I felt was my purpose. Um, it really is a constant grief. And like I said, the roller coaster every month, you have that grief that comes out of the disappointment that yet again your dream, your desire, the thing that you would hope for again isn't happening. And we I think as human beings, we just always say, well, why? You
yeah,
look around the world and you look at the fairness, you think that there's got to be a fairness of it. Um, and that doesn't make sense either. And so then we create these, responses that, maybe this is an explanation and it isn't the truth, and I know that that wasn't the reason why I wasn't getting pregnant was because I'd be a bad mother, but it would continue to come. Or yeah, what else would go through my mind? I mean, yeah, I think that was the biggest one that would always come uh, regularly. And I think the one of the difficulties is that people don't talk about these kinds of struggles.
So
They're
true.
not very open about it. I had
So true.
heard rumor of other people in my community who had struggled similarly,
Yeah.
um, but they had never mentioned it. I had just heard, like that first group of people where you talk kind of behind their back because you don't want to hurt their feelings or further cause more pain. So I had heard in those conversations that there were these other people, but they didn't speak of it. I do
Mm.
remember going up to one of them one time and trying to talk about it, but there was a real unwillingness to talk about it. And
Yeah.
it's not even that you need an answer necessarily, but just somebody who can understand your pain, somebody who can vocalize something that's been in your heart and mind that you weren't able to verbally explain. Just having that connection was something I longed for. And I never found it other than through um, one of my endometriosis books. They were letters to letters from women who were struggling with similar situations, and they put all the letters together into a book. And that one was very encouraging to me because they were saying the things that I thought only I was feeling.
Right. How did you cope? How did you cope?
A few things. A part of the faith community, and prayer was huge. Although prayer was also one of those things that I struggled with
Yes.
because it kept feeling like the answer to my prayers were no. Um, I was hoping that maybe the answer to my prayer is wait, but I was worried that it was always no because every month it was no, no, or not yet, not yet. Um, and so I really struggled through that. But our church was a huge support in that they prayed. Children were praying. I know that they said every night before I go to bed, I pray that
Oh
you can
dear.
have a baby.
Oh, oh my gosh. How wonderful. How wonderful.
And that
Yeah.
meant so much to us that other people were praying, even when we felt discouraged in prayer.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, we sometimes don't understand why God does what, doesn't make sense. And
Hmm.
especially when you're as loving and giving and kind and just so genuine, and you know that you have this love to give. It I can only I resonate with what you're saying in such a way that I can feel your pain. I feel your pain. I don't I don't always know why God does what he does. I just know that I'm so glad that you had a community with you to
Hmm.
help raise you up. And 15 years later, and all this time later, right? Time, while it may heal certain elements, time still reminds us of the things that we wished for. How were there other areas like were you able to connect with a support group outside of faith? Like was there those that also struggled with infertility, some kind of a support group or anything like that that you were able to attend? No,
No,
no.
no,
Yeah,
I felt very alone in that.
I bet.
Um, like I said, I found some books, and this is really I'm really old.
Why
This is before
not?
this is before the internet, or well, it's not really before the internet, but it's before we were connected in the way that we are
Exactly. I
now.
understand. Yeah, for
So
sure.
nowadays, you'd be able to probably get something online. You'd be able to connect with somebody, people from all over North America or the world. Um, that just wasn't an option, and so I did find books that did help me to read other people's um, how they had struggled through, and that really was quite helpful. I even really found my gynecologist not very helpful. You know, I would talk about the pain and how to manage that, and his response is, well, getting pregnant would that's what'll help endometriosis the most. Well, thank you very much. We've been trying for how many years, and obviously that's not working. So, just kind of see you later. Just grin and bear it.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, there really wasn't. I didn't really connect with that. We lived in a small town, as I mentioned before, 5 hours from the closest um, IVF clinic, and really services were very limited where we are, just a little town of under 2,000 people. So the
Yeah.
opportunities just really weren't there locally. Um, yeah, and I mean maybe nowadays that there'd be something online that would be, but no, other than my support from my church and my family, yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm glad that you had your friends and your
Hmm.
family and the church to be able to support you in that way. And what I also hear you say through this is that with even though with these wonderful different types of people that wanted to come and rally to support you, at the end of the day, unless you're experiencing it yourself, it's really hard, I would imagine, to receive. Like, what does that look like for you? And I'm curious, because we were talking about faith and sort of, I'm wondering whether or not there was an element. I heard you, question, yes, for sure, but were there moments of anger? And what did angry look like?
Hmm. Um, I really believe and have always believed that God is the giver of life. And so what I couldn't understand was why he wouldn't give that in our
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
So I researched and I tried to understand that some more. And there were a number of verses that really jumped out to me. One is the Psalm of Asaph, where he just says, "Hey, he's not talking about infertility, but he talks in the Psalm about looking around the world and seeing injustices all over the place. And he's saying, well, God, I don't really get it. I'm living my life in the way that you want me to. I'm serving you in this way. And I'm looking around, and the people who are doing the exact opposite are getting all kinds of wonderful blessings, and I'm not."
Yeah.
And he's saying, well, I don't get it. And in the Psalm, he says, I was ready to just kind of check my faith to say that, well, what is the point when. And he said, but until I came into the sanctuary of God and I saw it through his eyes and not through the eyes of, you can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing.
So true. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said, I saw the end. I saw the end of it all and not just the situation I was in right now.
Mm.
And God gave me that perspective. I mean, I lost it very often. You get disappointment, like I mentioned, the roller coaster, and
Of
you get
course.
angry and you go through all of that. But I would always come back to that perspective
Yeah.
where I saw it through God's eyes that, he has an end that can be trusted. And when I can't see his hand, I trusted his heart.
Yeah.
And I believed that he was a good God and that he did love his people. And so there was an end, whatever that end looked like, I wasn't sure. And so that was the other part I mentioned, prayer and getting disillusioned in that. There's another piece in the Bible where it talks about a widowed woman who continually would come to the judge and say, give me what I want. And she would come day after day saying, give me what I want. And she wouldn't be put off. And the parable in the Bible talks about, even though the judge wasn't a just person, her incessant nagging on this issue made the judge say, fine, I'll give it to you. And in the Bible, it says that's how you should pray.
Yeah.
Not saying that God is that unjust judge, but that we should not give up, that we should
Yeah.
continually pray. And
Yeah.
I said to God, you either take away this desire that is breaking my heart every month, or you give me what I want.
Good for you. And God did give you what you want, because
Yes.
your world looks very different now, even though you were not able to be with child in that way. God brought children to you, and so you have this wonderful family. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing that, how that hope has created such a beautiful family that you have now.
Yeah, it actually hit me this last year. My daughter turned 15. Um,
Wow.
we had prayed for 15 years for her, and this year she was 15. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, it really struck me that, for 15 years it was a struggle and a roller coaster of hope and grief. Um, And honestly, for the last 15, obviously there's bumps and things along the way, but just so much sunshine,
Yes.
um, and just so thankful. And um, I know that however it would have turned out, God would have sustained me and given me what I needed to
Yeah,
continue. But I am just so very
absolutely.
thankful that He did give me what I asked for.
Yeah.
I tried to be that incessant widow, coming to Him over and over, saying, and He said yes. And we waited for those many years, but He said yes. And I remember the day that the nurse called and said, "Your due date is." Uh, he
Wow.
said that, I literally felt like I left my body at that moment.
Wow.
Um, and I actually didn't hear anything else she said. I was euphoric, out of my body.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and what a wonderful pregnancy. It was great. I was so excited. I didn't complain about gaining weight or stretch marks. The whole thing I was just so excited about. And not really one care at all, until the day she was being born. Um, I had to have a C-section because I wasn't advancing in. I wasn't able to have her naturally. So they said, well, C-section. But other than that, it wasn't really anything to be worried about. But as they opened me, that endometriosis, unbeknownst to any of us, had fused together, the uterus, the placenta, and the
Oh,
um,
no.
the bladder. They were all together as one. And also unbeknownst, I don't know how, because there had been multiple, what do you call it, ultrasounds done. The whole thing, the bladder was stretched from the bottom all the way up under my ribs. Hadn't noticed anything. So
Wow.
on that day, as they had to do an emergency C-section, until they opened me up, they didn't know that I was absolutely bleeding out and everything was ripping apart. So they brought out our beautiful baby girl, healthy, happy, and then they had to subsequently try to save my life from bleeding to death, and they had to remove my
Oh,
uterus and
Vicky. Oh
fix
my
the
God.
bladder.
Oh
It was
my
kind of big,
God.
yeah. But I mean, I had no idea. So we had our excitement, but I also was very sad because that was the end of it. My uterus was gone. There was no more. And
Yeah.
we had gone through in vitro fertilization with ICSI. We had other frozen embryos that we had hoped to use. And so that was something I had to deal with, even as I was enjoying this wonderful blessing that we had just received.
Yeah.
Yeah, I no longer had a uterus to have another child.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So again, you're compounding, but the gift is there that you have your beautiful
Mhm,
daughter, but the
mhm,
pain as well, that sort of stop. Okay, here we
mhm,
go. That's that. Now, having said that, when you're talking about the IVF, and I just really want to stress this. I know nothing about this experience. I want our listeners to know that I'm asking these questions not to be voyeuristic in your life, but really to understand from a broader perspective, so that we may be able to touch another person's life that might be listening in this
mhm,
moment. And so I really don't understand the process between IVF or even really what, whether or not the embryos are taken from you, whether they're a combination of other people's either eggs or sperm in order to create.
mhm.
So would you mind just sort of sharing with our listeners a little bit more about really what is the IVF process? And then
Yeah.
of course, there's still so much more to talk about in your story. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so with endometriosis, I mean, there's been some studies that have been done, and one of the schools of thoughts is that with endometriosis, it causes a poor environment for the egg and the sperm to fertilize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so the reason why IVF is one of the highly recommended things in this case is because it takes that process away out of the body and occurs in a petri dish. So there's lots of different options when you go to an infertility clinic, or a fertility clinic. But in our case, we chose in vitro fertilization with ICSI. I can't remember what ICSI stands for. Again, you can look it up since we have the
The
Google
magic of
nowadays.
Google Doctor. So, and how
Um,
do you spell ICSI, just so that we can help our listeners?
ICSI. Yeah.
ICSI. Okay.
So I can
ICSI.
explain it to you. So the process of IVF is that first I had to learn to give myself shots on a regular basis so that my ovulation would be better than or more. You would have more than you would normally have, how many eggs you would get. So I had to do that for a time. And then you go into the fertility clinic. They harvest the eggs just by going up through the vagina and harvesting them that way.
Hmm.
Then my husband, of course, had to give his sperm,
Hmm.
and you just do that on your own, which could be an uncomfortable situation in cases too. So that they take the sperm, then put it together with the egg, and because we chose ICSI, instead of letting them do their own thing in the petri dish and the fertilization occurring there, they actually inserted the sperm with a device so that
Hmm.
they did the fertilization themselves.
To ensure that
Um,
that was fertilized then, rather than it
yeah,
just swimming in the dish and trying to
mm,
connect that way. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so then once the fertilized eggs are ready, then we go in again, and they would insert up to 2 eggs into my uterus, again through the same process that they harvested the eggs,
Yeah.
and then you wait to see. And so our first try, um, I was sure,
Yeah.
we went through all of this. I'm sure we ended up having um, seven embryos. So they inserted the first 2, and it nothing happened. It didn't work.
Oh my.
And so, I mean, we're used to the hope and the devastation, but this was even more because,
Yeah.
you really had thought. And I should say too, the second time we went back. So the first time we went, we were in our 30s, but the second time we went back was we were creeping up to 40, and that's why we thought, you know, time isn't our friend anymore. And when we went back, they gave us, I think it was 25% chance, and it had gone up from 10 to 25%
Which is
chance.
fantastic. That's huge. Yeah.
Way better than less than 1% is what they
Yeah.
gave me on my own. So yeah, when we went back, that's how that was. And so then the other eggs are cryopreserved, kind of like these sci-fi movies. They talk about cryopreservation. That's what they do with the embryos. So then we went back and a few months later to try again. And so they defrosted 2 more of those eggs. They died, 2 more of those eggs. And so then they defrosted 2 more. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That sounds about right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. And they inserted those in. And one of those is our daughter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. With IVF, is there any chances of topical pregnancies? Was topical pregnancy ever an issue for you in the past prior to having IVF?
Mhm. No, I didn't have any pregnancies, at least none that I was aware of before.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, is there a chance of it? I can't really remember. That would be a
yeah,
question for the infertility clinic, but
sure.
it's very low actually, as far as I can remember, if there's any chance at all, because everything is so clinically taken care of. I mean, even when they called and said, "Here's your due date," I mean, literally, I was
Yes.
pregnant for a week, and they could tell you, and I can tell you, she was born an hour and 20 minutes before her due date,
Oh,
so it
wow.
was accurate, very accurate. Yeah.
Very, very, very clean, and they know the data, which thank goodness for that. That's, I'm sure,
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, it was a
Uh,
wonderful clinic. I could give a shout out to Genesis Fertility Clinic in Vancouver.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very professional. They really know what they're doing. Makes you feel very comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just so glad that there's a place for people to be able to have these options available to them. I
Mhm.
know, that you have spoken and said, when you were in your 30s, you'd had some of the eggs harvested. And then towards later, when you were nearing your 40s, you just were sort of defrosting them. How long do your eggs last in these environments?
Um, well, actually, we went and inquired in my 30s, but we decided not to do IVF
Oh,
at
I
the
see.
time.
Yeah,
So we went back in my 40s. So that's when they harvested the eggs. They last a long time,
yeah,
cryopreservation. I don't remember or recall, and it might have changed. The science improves so quickly. As I said, I went in my early 30s and then in my late 30s, and the science had changed incredibly in that short
yeah,
amount of time.
yeah.
So I'm not sure, but it's a long time.
It's a
Yeah, I
long
know that
time.
people
Yeah,
who undergo cancer treatments, often
yes.
before they undergo that, they'll harvest their eggs and save them for a future that they hope to have. Um, and yeah, so yeah.
This isn't an inexpensive process, right? So, let's talk a little bit about that. You went in twice, three times, right? On this, the fifth of the six that were there, one of them is your daughter. And like, was it 20,000 every time you went for each of those, or was the whole process of the harvesting, like what did that look like? I mean,
Mm,
that's quite a lot.
yeah. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
what it is now because, like I said, she's 15
times
now.
changed for
I
sure.
bet you it's a lot more than it
I
was.
suspect so.
Yeah, and every time you try, of course, that is some additional amount. And then, of course, this isn't even including the cost to travel down there and stay for a few days. Thankfully, we had some friends who lived in Richmond, so we could, save some money there. But yeah, for one cycle, for us, it was around $20,000. So that would be the getting prepared to harvest the ovaries, having the fertilization process occur, implanting it into that process was about for us $20,000. And then each subsequent try is going to cost, another thousand or a few hundred for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
for
if you
sure.
want to keep your eggs preserved each year, you would pay a fee to have them. Yeah.
My goodness. So when you started, you were excited about being pregnant. What did that look like for you? I mean, you've been waiting for so long. Your dream has now come true, and that you're ready to have this, you've got this wonderful creature, beautiful, beautiful soul growing inside
Mhm.
of you. Were you close with the people that were trying to protect you or be helpful or that were oblivious, those three kind of types
Yeah.
of people? What was their reactions? What was your reaction when you were sharing?
Hmm. Well, as you asked the question, I was thinking more about the difference in reaction between myself and my husband.
Yes,
So
interesting.
I'm wondering if it's because it's my body and this human being is inside, and you have this connection in a different way than your spouse does. Um, so, like I said, as soon as I got that message, your due date is, and I just was euphoric and excited, and I really, although maybe there was a slight doubt, really, I just thought this is it. This is our blessing. This is going to be our child. I embrace that fully. My husband, however, had a really difficult time
Yeah.
um, to accept it. He was afraid that at any moment the floor would still fall out.
Yes.
And until
Yes.
I think he saw her when she was born, he finally gave up his fear that this would not come to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, today we're talking about my experience, but there's the whole other half, of the partnership that is involved in this. And we often talk about the woman's side, or we don't often talk about any side, but if we talk about a side, it's the woman's side. And, my husband, both of us struggled in different ways throughout that whole time. Yeah.
We have so much more to explore in this conversation. I just need to take a moment for a quick station identification and to remind people who you are and about this conversation. So, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a quick jump out and jump back. If you have just tuned into CHLY 101.7 FM, my name is Kathy Holmes. I'm your host of Act Three. Today, we're talking about a little bit of a tough subject for a lot of people. And I think that I feel so blessed that Vicky Trill is with us today, that she's able to sort of help unpack a very, very common occurrence in a lot of women's lives. And I think that her vulnerability and kindness is hopefully going to help some of you that are listening to this program. And I just want to start by thanking her for being here and for sharing this very intimate conversation. Um, I'd also like to remind everybody that Christmas time is not always warm and fuzzy for people. There are a lot of people in our community that are struggling. We know that there are a lot of people on Vancouver Island and around the province that are struggling with homelessness or unhoused situations right now, couch surfing or doing whatever they can to get out of the cold. I remind you that we have the ability in this community to help out. And so I encourage you to think about how you can help this Christmas. Find in your heart that place that really inspires you. There's lots of places you can go. Salvation Army certainly is one of them. That's one of my particular favorites, but there's so many out there. We do encourage you to think about where you're putting your dollars this year. Another thing to think about too is that if you are planning on giving your gifts this year, it might be nice that you ask the people that you're giving to, what do they need right now? They might actually need some help with their rent. They might need help with a bill. They might need help with a new coat or a pair of shoes for their children. I really invite you to be more open than you've ever been. This year has been particularly tough. We've gone through COVID. We've gone through all that other stuff. It's now time that we celebrate with each other. Let's hold each other up. So if you would like to know other places where you might want to put your money, we have a couple thoughts for you, and you can find them out by watching what used to be Shaw Cable 4 is now Rogers Cable 4. So our show has shifted not only from being Act 3 on Shaw, we are no longer Act 3 on Shaw, we are now Act 3 on Rogers Cable. So check us out on Channel 4 or Channel 105, or find us, of course, on our YouTube station through Spotify Radio, pardon me, and iHeartRadio, as well as here on CHLY 101.7. And by the way, 101.7 CHLY does also need a little bit of help at this time of year. We rely on everyone to contribute to keep this community radio station alive. And so let's make, think about $5 a month, maybe that, doesn't really hurt, but it helps a lot in our community. So we do appreciate that you tune into Act 3 and other programs like us. Thanks again for being here today. So Vicky Trill is my guest. I am so, so, so happy that she's sharing this time with us. Welcome back to the program, Vicky. Thank you so much again for being here. We have broken out some of this endometriosis and infertility conversation from your perspective. But just before we went for that little station identification, we talked about the other half, right? About the men in our lives, the husbands, the partners. And, quite often, you're right. A lot of people don't necessarily think about infertility from that perspective. Again, to be supporting the concept as opposed to being voyeuristic. How can we help the men in our lives in a better way as they struggle through this also?
I'm not even sure. In our particular circumstance, we've always just been best friends, and so working through these things together, I think really was, we prayed about these things together. We talked about it together. We didn't always do it perfectly, but
nobody does under any circumstances, for sure.
That was huge for us.
Sure.
And again, both of us had our family and church family to rely on. And I think finding a trusted person to chat with is so critical in no matter what sort of heartbreaking thing that you might be going through. If you have that one trusted person, and you don't need answers, you just need a listening, loving heart.
So true.
And I think my husband had that. I had that. And that would be what I could say for in our circumstance was one of our saving graces. Mm-hmm.
So I love your daughter's name, and I'm curious because part of her name includes the word grace.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the gift as a kindness towards God for the goodness that He bestowed upon you in bringing her to your life?
I wish that was exactly why we chose it. Does, doesn't that sound like that would be the right thing to do?
Sounds like the right one for sure.
But
Absolutely.
but actually it is kind of cool. So both of us, we just love our grandmas so much. And so she's named after my grandmother Mary and his grandmother Grace, both of whom had
Oh,
huge impacts in our life. But afterwards, I thought to myself, wait a second, I should have looked up what the meaning of those names are, because names, it means a lot to
I
me
do.
just to have,
Absolutely. Yeah.
to just not choose them randomly, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I should have looked up what they mean. So I looked it up after the fact, and Mary means wish for, and grace means blessing.
Oh my
And I
God.
thought,
Wish for blessing. Wow.
yeah, and I had no
Divine
idea we
intervention.
named
I'm
them after our
sorry.
grandmothers, but she's the wished for blessing. And I thought,
Yeah.
I think God must have picked that name because I didn't look that up ahead of time, and that's exactly who she is. She's our wish for blessing. And yeah, I think about that all the time. And it's interesting, I mentioned our church and friends who had prayed for us, and you asked about how did the community react. I sent out over 150 thank you cards after she was born for
Yeah.
gifts that we had received. The whole community celebrated with us, whether they were part of our family or church or not, because everybody knew whether they were one of those three people, the helpers or the ignore it or the let's not do any more harm group.
Yeah.
They all cared in their own way,
Yeah.
and they celebrated wholeheartedly with us. And it just was wonderful. And quite often our church family would say to us, we really feel like she's our our child too, because
Absolutely.
everybody was so invested.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now that she's in her mid-years, right? She's in a teenager now. Does she realize just what a great gift she has been to your family? Or as a teenager, she's just like, ah, mom, dad, you know how teenagers can be. Like this, is she really cognizant of such the gift that you were given by having her?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think she does realize, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it feels like to be that gift.
of
Um,
course.
because people have said that to her very often. In the story, I did tell myself, because you asked
Yeah,
me, was there anybody to support? Could I have anybody to talk to? Was there anybody?
yeah,
No.
yeah,
The answer was really largely no. And so
yeah,
I promised that I would be open about infertility, about the struggle. And so I've talked about this story, and I talk about it whenever I have an opportunity, because I don't know who may be sitting there who's struggling and who needs somebody to just, listen. And so I've been really open. So she knows the story. She's heard it many times. People in our community will remind her too, because they were a part of that process. But yeah, I don't know how she feels that she is that, the answer
yeah.
to our prayer and the blessing.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if they should. Or, I think about teenagers as they are. They're just being teenagers, and it's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. They know their parents love them. They know that, that that they're part of the community and part of the, friends, family, and all of that. They know all of that stuff, but you're quite right. At 15, they're thinking about, what their video game is or what's going on at school or, the boy or the. So I suspect that there's something to be said for that. You also talked a little bit earlier on in the hour. We discussed a little bit about the laparoscopy. I never say that word properly. Laparoscopy. How do you say the word again? Laparoscopy.
Laparoscopy. Yeah.
Laparoscopy. So for people that go in for endometriosis, I have people in my life that have suffered from it, and likewise, were unable to have children. But the surgery was always that promise that things would get better. So
Mhm.
I'm curious about your experience with the surgery itself during that 15 years, and just sort of to shed a little bit of light on, what the surgery can possibly do from a pain perspective
Mhm.
or from the management of the body perspective. What does that look like?
Yeah. So the first one was really looking for answers. Like, what's going
Yes.
on? Why am I not getting pregnant? And what does it
Yeah.
have to do with anything? And so that's when I found out I had endometriosis, because the laparoscope saw it, sees it.
Yeah.
They actually video all of them. I found out later I could have given them a DVD and I could have seen the insides of everything, which
Wow.
I really would do in retrospect. So if anyone is going in for that, bring your DVD and ask them for a copy.
Exactly. Yeah, for
Apparently it
sure.
can be done. So that the first one was that. Um, and yeah, so then I got the diagnosis, and I was also told that, hey, stuff is cleaned out, so your chances might be increased to get pregnant. So lots of hope after that. There's a bit of healing, but I mean, the laparoscope is pretty amazing. They go in through the belly button and then a couple little spots, kind of on the bikini line, so that you really don't end up with much scarring.
Yeah.
But certainly they put the air in and they blow you up. And so you have all of that gas that has to dissipate. And that's actually what I found to be the most painful part, is the gas that has to go
Yes,
out
absolutely. Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you heal, and in my situation, my pain would reduce with the endometriosis after that for a bit. But then it came back, and I think I had four altogether, and each time it was pretty much the same. They found all three types of endometriosis in there. They would clean it out, and I would have a short time of reprieve from the pain, and then it would come back.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And that's the unfortunate piece of it, is that every time you are having your period, you're sloughing off. And if it doesn't want to go to where it's supposed to go, then yeah, for sure. Were there medications that were helpful for you at the time? Or I know that people have come a long way in the way of fertility
mhm,
medications and vitamin supplements and things like that. Please
yeah.
be aware that I'm not wanting to sound like one of those people that is trying to offer
Yeah.
that advice. That's not what I mean, but I'm curious as to whether there was at least something that could help you as you were going
Mm,
through it to deal with the physical side of it.
mhm. Um, well, because I was always trying to get pregnant, I was limited to what I would
Yeah,
want to use. That was my choice. I did take the pill for a while, and as long as I was on the pill, I actually felt good.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, of course, when I got pregnant, I felt very good too. But I was also told that even though, um, so I thought maybe let me see, yes, after I had to have the uterus removed, I thought that the endometriosis would stop. But actually, that's not necessarily the case, which is interesting,
yeah.
because I guess you have the disease in other parts of your body, and so you can continue to have it, although much less of a chance. For me, it did stop. So that was one positive thing of having to take that uterus out in an emergency. I haven't had the pain again. It
Oh,
seems to
thank
be
God.
completely gone.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And there were no other complications as a result of having all of that done. Obviously, I mean, you could have bled out. Thank God that you were able to survive it. I mean,
Yeah,
I can't imagine you going through all of that birth and then
yeah,
holy mackerel, like just,
yeah,
you must
yeah.
have been
My
quite
husband didn't
frightened.
know for the first while whether he would be a single dad. It was quite scary for him.
I bet.
Um, yeah, yeah. They had to repair the bladder because it had been fused and stretched and everything else. And so I did
Yeah.
go home. I was in the hospital for a week, which is quite unusual nowadays. And then also went home with with a urine bag or whatever you call them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to have that for a while, until the bladder healed appropriately, and then they were able to. So it was, and then because I had lost so much blood, I felt like it was probably half a year before I was starting to feel back to myself. So the healing process was quite long.
Were you prone to infections or anything like that while you were struggling with endometriosis?
No, not that I know of.
That's good. That's good.
Mhm.
Okay. I I I'm looking at the time and I'm just really sad right now because it's coming to that point where we need to start closing off the program. We just have a few minutes left. So I, I, I got, a couple of asks for you as we are closing out the program. Um, you know, you went through this as a young woman and during a time when respectfully every year something gets better in our medical community, something gets better that we can grow from. But during that time I would imagine that that the emotional side of it was probably one of the most challenging of all of the things that were going on, both with your body, with your heart, with your
Mhm.
spirit, with your mind. And so I'm curious if you could share with our listeners, some things that really helped you to keep going forward, keep pushing forward,
Mhm.
keep believing that it was going to be that it was all going to be okay.
Yeah, it would be my belief in God and the faith that I had,
Yeah,
and that I have, and that when I can't see His hand, I chose to trust His heart.
yeah,
And that is really what what kept me going throughout that time. And yeah, he also, I don't, yeah, we're running out of time, but just a few years before we were blessed with our pregnancy and subsequently our daughter, um, I had a dream,
Mm.
and in the dream, I saw myself and this young first year college or university young lady and my husband. And in there, this young person was chatting with my husband about this great first year and all of this. And he was just so excited. This is great. And that's great. And I did this and I did that. And I said to God in the dream, "Who is that?" And he said, "Your daughter."
Oh my God. Wow.
So that, and I was sure, I was 100% sure that it was at a low time in my life when I thought, how much longer? Like, I still have this desire that doesn't go away. When will God say yes instead of wait,
Yes.
wait, 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 wait? And at that time, that's when that dream came. And I knew that I was just waiting that he would give me what I asked for.
It was just time.
Yeah.
A moment of blessing, a moment
Yeah,
of breath.
absolutely. Our wished for blessing.
And I just I feel so blessed that you shared this story with us today, with our listeners today, that
So
you
happy to.
I I feel, and I know that our listeners, for those that are not watching this, and I do encourage people to tune into YouTube to watch it, to really see the beauty in your face and the
And the
sharing
tears
that
will be
you're
damaging.
giving. Well, I feel, and I'm doing it too. And that's like, it's bad for my mascara, but it's good for my soul. So you can always apply more mascara, but that whole blessing of the soul is something to be said. And so with that, I just want to thank you one more time. And
Absolutely. And feel free to share my contact information because who knows who's out there who just needs somebody to listen. I'm happy to do
I
that.
normally halfway through the program tell people to go to grab a piece of paper and a pen really quickly, and I didn't, for the reason thinking this is your personal world. So if you want to just shout that out, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening and you've got that piece of paper, grab it quick, or check us out. We'll get the information to you.
Absolutely.
How
Yes.
can people reach you, Vicky?
Yes. My email address is pretty easy as long as you can spell my name. So it's Vicky Trill, VICKYTRILL at yahoo.com.
Fantastic. And I giggle because you're on Yahoo, but you're on Yahoo. That
Yahoo!
takes us to the end of the show today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We do hope that you have the most spectacular day. And again, thank you for sharing your vulnerability and your story with our listeners. I
Thanks
know
for
that
having me.
everybody that's heard you today is probably in tears themselves. And if they're not, they're holding you up and just, sending huge blessings to you and your family. Thank you again. It's
Thank
been a
you so
pleasure to
much.
have you today. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Act 3.